Hello. These are three of the most heart-wrenching animal rescue stories from the vastness of Reddit. If you are very impressionable, you better not listen. Story number 1.
My name is Tom. I'm 34, and I work remotely. Boring schedule, too much screen time, and a life without much excitement. Everything changed when I rented a house near a forest in Oregon, finally deciding to escape the concrete walls of the city. The house was old but cozy. In the mornings, the air smelled of pine and damp earth. I enjoyed the solitude until one day I heard a strange, barely audible whimper outside. I stepped onto the porch and found a tiny puppy under the steps, gray, skinny, eyes half closed. My instinct kicked in instantly. I brought him inside, washed him, fed him. I named him Spark. That was the beginning of a strange chain of events that I still can't explain. A week later, while walking Spark along the trail, he barked and dashed into the bushes. I followed and found a cage. A real, rusty cage in the middle of the forest. Inside was a fox. Skinny, wounded, wearing a collar. What the hell was she doing in a trap in a national park? I called a ranger. While I waited, I sat near the cage, feeling an odd sense of dread. The fox looked me straight in the eye, and I swear, there was something human in her gaze. Not fear. Not aggression. Regret? The ranger was a man in his 40s, tired-looking, reluctant. He listened, nodded, and said, "Poachers sometimes leave traps." Nothing unusual. He took the fox, promising to deliver her to a wildlife center. I wanted to believe him. But a couple of days later, I found another trap. Then another. The problem was, none of the animals in them were alive. One day, a mutilated raccoon. Then an owl with broken wings. Every time, the same type of cage. The same smell. The same nail sticking out of a tree nearby, like a marker. I started logging coordinates and sending them to the local wildlife protection agency. No response. But then the watchers appeared. At first, I thought it was paranoia. But then I noticed a black pickup truck near the edge of the forest. It sat too long. Inside were two people, and they were definitely watching me. I started documenting everything. Installed cameras around the house. Created a folder for files. This wasn't a hobby anymore. I felt like I was caught in something bigger. One day Spark disappeared. Just didn't return from his run. I panicked. Searched the whole forest, screamed myself hoarse. Came home late at night. Then I heard a soft creak in the backyard. I went out with a flashlight. And saw him. Spark was tied to a tree. Unharmed, but frightened. And next to him was a note. "Stay out of places you're not invited. This is the last warning." The handwriting was uneven. The paper dirty. I was shaking with anger and fear. The next day, I went to the police in town. Showed them the coordinates, photos, video footage. The black pickup was on camera. The officer skimmed through the folder and said he'd look into it when he had time. His smile was exactly like the ranger's. I realized they knew. Or they were part of it. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. Kept searching for connections. Turned out, more than 10 pets had gone missing in the county over the past 2 years. All cases closed. No leads. No evidence. So I did something I shouldn't have. I set bait. Left a fake trap in the woods, with a camera inside. And waited. On the 3rd night, someone came. A man. He wore a mask. At first, I thought he was just checking the trap and would leave. But then he pulled a rabbit out of his backpack. Placed it inside. Tied it down. Then, he pulled out something metallic and started pushing it under the rabbit's paws. The camera had no sound, but I saw the rabbit twitch. I ran out with my flashlight, yelling. He bolted. I didn't see his face. When I reached the rabbit, it was already dead. Eyes wide open. I took the video to an independent press outlet in Portland. The reporter I showed everything to was shocked. She promised to investigate. The next day, I came home and realized someone had been inside. Cameras gone. Hard drive missing. Backup flash drives smashed. I hadn't told the reporter about the backups. So, was I being listened to? I packed up and left. Now I live in another state. But every week, I get a postcard in the mail with forest landscapes. No message. No signature. Sometimes I wonder, what if I hadn't picked up Spark? Or hadn't opened that first cage? Would everything be different? But other times I think maybe those animals saved me. Maybe they knew what was coming. Maybe they led me there so I could try to stop it, even for a moment. I don't know if this is still going on. But I know one thing, there's something happening in those woods no one wants to talk about. And if you ever hear a whimper under your porch, don't ignore it. It might be the beginning. Or a warning. I thought I had left for good. New city, new job, Spark always by my side. I even started to forget how scared I used to be, gasping for breath at night, waking up from the sound of a branch snapping outside. But it was all an illusion. 3 months later, I received an envelope. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single item, a piece of fur. Gray, with the same yellow specks as Spark's. And a short note. You took what wasn't yours. Bring it back. Spark sat by the door, tail down, eyes lowered. He didn't bark, but I could tell he knew. He had always known that we hadn't really left, only delayed our return. I made the decision to go back. Not to understand. But to end it. When I returned to Oregon, the house was empty but not abandoned. The fence sagged, the door was slightly ajar. Inside, everything was in place, like I'd left just yesterday. Except one thing, under the stairs, where I first found Spark, now stood an empty cage. Clean. Oiled. Ready. On the table was another envelope. Inside, a flash drive. And that same note. Watch. Then decide. I drove to a motel and plugged the drive into my laptop. The video had no date. It was footage from the very camera I had set up by the forest trap. On screen, me. I was walking through the forest. But not alone. Behind me, a figure. I didn't see it. Then I stopped. The figure pulled something from their bag and tossed it at my feet. The video cut off. Then another recording. Someone in a mask sat in front of the camera. He didn't speak. Just held up a tag. On it was engraved. Tom. Subject 41. I don't know how long I sat there in silence. The motel room, the walls, the hum of the fan all faded. I was in a trap I had never seen. The next morning, I went to see the reporter I had worked with. Her apartment door was open. Inside, a mess. Torn papers. Empty flash drives. On the fridge, someone had taped a photo. Me. Sleeping. Spark at the window. I grabbed everything I could and left. I realized, there's no getting out of this. It's not just cruelty. It's an organization. A program. An experiment. I'm not the hero. I'm the variable. A piece of the equation. I'm recording this for one reason, so someone else understands, everything that begins with a whimper under the porch can end much, much worse. These aren't just animals. They're bait. Or warnings. Or surveillance. And maybe they're not just watching. Maybe they're choosing.
Story number 2.
My name is Michael. I'm 42, and a year ago, I was at the edge. I won't go into all the details. Let's just say that after my divorce and my father's death, I sold everything and disappeared into the middle of nowhere. Literally, an old, crooked house in the Virginia mountains, no neighbors for miles. Internet barely worked, and I was glad. I wanted silence. No one. Nothing. Not even myself. I bought the house from some old man. He warned me. Winters are rough, wild animals all around. I didn't care. I just wanted to be left alone. The first few months were rough, but familiar. I didn't drink. I'd promised myself I wouldn't. I fixed things around the house, slept a lot, read. The silence was healing. Until it wasn't. It was December. The first heavy snow had fallen. I woke to a strange, high-pitched sound outside my window. At first I thought coyotes. But the sound was too thin, too desperate, like something was crying out for help. I didn't sleep again until sunrise. In the morning I heard it again. Faint. Broken. Like it was scratching at the glass of my soul. I grabbed a flashlight, my coat, and went out. The cold stung my face, my breath hung in the air. I followed a trail. Snow was disturbed, dotted with small drops of blood. After a few dozen steps, I found it. A dog. A puppy, technically. Big, but emaciated. A filthy, battered Doberman with shredded paws. One of his hind legs dragged behind him, likely broken. He looked at me and growled. Weakly. More fear than aggression. I didn't know what to do. Leave him? Call someone? But out here, there was only signal on the hilltop, and the nearest shelter was over an hour away, if they even answered. I just took off my coat and, without knowing why, wrapped him in it. He didn't resist. I named him Bruno. No reason, it was the first thing that came to mind. Bruno stayed with me for almost a month. The first days were hell. He howled in pain, wouldn't eat, hid under the stairs. I bought food, bandages, tried to dress his leg, though I'm no vet. I honestly didn't know if he'd make it. But he did. Slowly he got better. Started eating. Stopped trembling every time I moved. Came out from under the stairs. One day, he just laid his head on my lap. No reason. That was the first time I cried in years. 2 months later, he was limping through the yard, chasing birds. Sleeping by my side. Looking at me like he knew he saved me, just like I saved him. And then, in March, they came. 2 men in a van. No uniforms. Said they were looking for an aggressive Doberman that escaped from a farm. I lied, said he was a mutt. They didn't believe me. One of them reached toward Bruno's collar, and Bruno growled. Really growled. Enough to make me freeze. They said they'd be back with the police. And drove off. I didn't wait. That same night, I packed everything, loaded Bruno into the truck, and we left. Crossed into North Carolina. I had his saliva tested for DNA. 2 weeks later, I got the results. He wasn't even a pure Doberman. A mix, Doberman, Weimaraner, and something else. I applied for his registration. Got a number. Became his legal owner. It's been over half a year since then. We live in a small house by the river now. I found freelance work. Started drawing again. Bruno's still with me. Always. Sometimes, he wakes up at night and stares out the window. I think he remembers. And I think about this a lot. I saved a dog. But maybe he saved me first. Because the night I found him, I wasn't just out for a walk. There was a rope belt in my coat pocket. And a goodbye letter to my sister. And maybe that desperate cry, that broken whimper in the snow, pulled me back from the edge I was about to step off. A few more months passed. Life with Bruno almost felt normal. I stopped waking from panic. He stopped flinching from nightmares. Together, we built something like peace, morning runs, coffee on the porch, and zero human contact. I began to think the bad days were finally over. But, as it often happens, the past finds a way back. One evening, I heard Bruno growl by the door. He rarely did, unless someone got too close. But out here, near the river, close was a rare thing. I looked out the window. A black SUV sat on the dirt road. No plates. No lights. Nobody got out. It just sat there, staring at the house like a predator waiting for its moment. After a few minutes, it slowly pulled away. Deliberate. Taunting. At first, I told myself it was a coincidence. A lost tourist, maybe. But 3 days later, the SUV returned. Closer. And then, a week later, I got a letter. No stamp. No return address. Just a plain envelope in my mailbox. Inside, one word. Ours. My heart sank. I remembered those two men. Back at the old house. They said they were looking for a dangerous Doberman. But now I wondered, was it ever a farm? What if he didn't escape? What if he ran? I bought a cheap trail cam and strapped it to a tree near the house. A few days later, I checked the footage. There was a figure. A man in a hood. Standing by the window. Whispering. Not my name. No threats. Just the same words over and over. Come home. Come home. You remember? You were strong there. You killed there. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. Then I drove into town. Found a vet clinic that did microchip scans. Asked them to scan Bruno again, just to check. The vet frowned. Scanned again. Huh, that's strange, he said. This chip, it's military. What? I choked out. Yeah. That's not the kind we use. It's an army-grade chip. These are used in service dogs and some experimental programs. It has an encrypted code. I can't read it. Only military servers can. When we got home, I didn't speak. Bruno looked at me like he understood everything. And then, the strangest thing happened. The next morning, he was gone. I searched the whole property. The woods. Everywhere. No tracks. No scent. Like he vanished. I lost my mind, called shelters, clinics, even the cops. 3 days. Nothing. And on the 4th, he came back. Bloody paw. And wearing a collar I'd never seen before. On the collar was a tag. No name. Just cold letters and numbers. K91. Return to base. What do I do now? Who can I even turn to? I'm scared for Bruno. Has anyone out there ever heard of military programs involving dogs?
Story number 3.
Hi. My name is Lily, I'm 29 years old, and for the past 6 years I've been a volunteer at a small animal shelter in upstate New York. This job is my passion. But there's a dark side to it, one that people rarely talk about. I want to share a few stories from my experience that have left a permanent mark on me. One morning, an elderly man came into the shelter. He was holding the leash of a large, ginger Labrador. The dog was old, limping, but his eyes still glowed with loyalty. The man stood tall, but I could tell he was barely holding himself up. I asked how we could help. He placed the leash on the counter and said quietly, "His name is Rusty. I'm 84. Yesterday, I was diagnosed with cancer. They gave me 6 months. Maybe less. I don't want him starving next to my body when I'm gone." I didn't know what to say. He gently stroked Rusty's head and whispered, "I'm sorry, buddy. I'm not abandoning you. I'm protecting you the best I can." We took the dog in. The man left without looking back. He died 3 weeks later. Rusty sat by the shelter door for days, howling softly at night. As if he, too, had no reason to go on. That was over a year ago. Rusty has since been adopted into a loving home. But that story still gives me chills every time I think about it. This was the hardest case I've ever faced. And the most morally devastating. A woman brought in her son, maybe 11 years old. She held his hand tightly, like she was afraid he'd run. In her other hand, she carried a cat carrier. Inside was a cat, wrapped in bandages. "He hurt him," she said, voice shaking. I didn't know. I only saw what was happening when it was already too late. She was crying. The boy was silent, staring at the floor. The cat's name was Ginger. He survived. But he lost an eye, his tail, and his trust in people. He hissed, scratched, thrashed in the cage like every touch was a punishment. We reported it to Child Services. The boy was taken in for evaluation. Doctors diagnosed deep trauma, aggression, likely a result of domestic abuse. A child psychologist said he wasn't just being cruel, he was reenacting what he saw at home. His mother, as it turned out, was a victim herself. She suffered years of violence from her husband. We noticed later, she was missing the tips of 2 fingers on her right hand. God knows what else had happened behind closed doors. We did everything we could to get the authorities involved. But without an official report from her and without solid evidence beyond the psychologist's word, their hands were tied. I've thought about that boy so much. How cruelty grows from pain. How children who are left without help can become dangerous, not because they're monsters, but because no one saved them. And maybe, just maybe, that cat didn't only save himself, but also others. There's one more haunting story I'll never forget. A man called us and said, "There's a farm near here. I hear something screaming every day. It's not right." We went out there. An old building. Boarded windows. Inside, filth, the stench of blood and rot. And cages. Dozens of them. In the cages sat geese, most of them bald, with open, bleeding wounds. They weren't being fed. They weren't given water. They were being plucked alive. For feathers. For profit. They called it a family business. We called the police and animal control immediately. It took 4 days to remove all the survivors. Many had to be euthanized, too far gone to save. The rest were sent to farms and shelters across the state. Some of them still don't let people come close. They run to corners, bury their heads. And I can't blame them. Animals don't know how to lie. When they're afraid, it's because someone really hurt them. Lastly, I want to share the story of one of our staff members, with his permission. A boy, about 15, brought us a tiny, terrified ferret. He didn't say a word. Just set the cage on the table and walked out. The ferret was covered in burns. There were cigarette marks on his skin. His paws were wrapped in makeshift bandages. We'd never seen anything like it. He flinched at the light. We named him Tick. A week later, a social worker came by. She told us the boy lived in a violent, broken household. His father, an alcoholic with a history of aggression, used the ferret as a living punching bag. He'd hurt it when he got angry. The boy had been hiding Tick in a closet. Feeding him, trying to care for him. When he realized he couldn't keep him safe anymore, he brought him to us. Tick survived. He now lives with one of our veterinarians. And the boy? He's now 18. He studies to become a vet tech and works at our shelter. We've become close friends. When I learned the whole story, it broke me even more. His father had driven his mother to her death. The official report said stroke. But we all know better. One day, the boy told me, "I couldn't save my mom. But I saved him." At least that. I still get a lump in my throat when I think about those words. We managed to get the man sentenced to 4 years in prison for animal cruelty. There's still an ongoing investigation to prove his involvement in the mother's death. I pray he gets life. Because sometimes justice isn't just about punishment. It's about giving a broken boy a reason to believe in something again.